we have, it's always good to start off, I think, these sessions with a sort of overview of the data, and DappRadar is all about data. So Skirmantas is going to take us through some numbers on the state of play blockchain gaming in 2021. I think we're going to have a lot of numbers, a lot of graphs with big spiky lines going up to the right, aren't we, Skirmantas? I hope. The top right hand corner of the graph. It's going to be getting a lot of action in these ones, I think.
Long time no see.
Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? Good. So Skirmantas, yeah, good. Skirmantas has got the next 25 minutes. We'll try and get questions in as appropriate. So please put questions in the questions box, but I'll disappear and leave it over to you.
Okay, cool. Thank you, John. So thank you for having me here. Now we begin with the state of play. So kind of looking at blockchain gaming in 2021, what happened, where are we, and what's next? Who I am. So John did quite a bit of introduction already, but just to repeat and give something more, well, I'm Skirmantas. I'm the CEO of DappRadar, which I co-founded with Dragos in 2018. And so DappRadar was our way of giving back to community by sharing data. 3 years ago, dApps data wasn't a thing at all. And we wanted to help people find those dApps and make good investment decisions in the end. DappRadar now is the world's leading dApp store with nearly 7,000 dApps across more than 20 different blockchains and protocols. And we also have a portfolio management suite. Now, I think by now it's pretty obvious that we are firm believers in the decentralized economy. And so as every presentation, probably nowadays in gaming, it has to start with Axie Infinity, right? So Axie very well illustrates what's going on in blockchain gaming. This play to earn movement basically has been on absolute tears since the second quarter of this year. It all started in May when Axie moved to Ronin, an Ethereum sidechain that allows transactions at high speed with almost non-existent gas fees. And since then, Axie has become the most valuable NFT collection ever, surpassing $1.7 billion in total sales by the end of August. So now it's even higher than that. It surpassed 2 billion. But almost half of this amount occurred in August. Axie generated $355 million in revenues in August alone. And that means they left important dApps like Uniswap, like OpenSea, and even some blockchains like Bitcoin behind in terms of revenue. And while the game's metrics are something to behold, the biggest news come from a political standpoint. So Axie Infinity has become relevant enough to raise attention of the Philippines government, a country that is basically home to more than 500,000 active Axie gamers. And the Filipino Finance Undersecretary, they publicly stated that all the earnings from play-to-earn platforms will become subject to tax legislation. And in Axie's case, if you don't know, players may reasonably earn from $5 to $10 per day at the current price of the SLP token. So that is about $150 to $300 per month if you keep grinding every day. And this amount is specifically significant in emerging economies. So that's big money. And according to recent official sources, the Philippine GDP increased by 11.8% in Q2 of 2021. How much of that, Axie contributed? Who knows? Maybe we'll see that. And so the play to earn movement is, raising attention from a macro perspective. And the state of play in this segment, it sums up why this emerging category is becoming a part of bigger agenda. So putting Axie aside for a while, the whole blockchain gaming segment skyrocketed this year. So just some numbers here. In August, a daily average of 2 million unique wallets interacted with a blockchain app. These are not necessarily users, because a user can have multiple wallets, but that's still a significant number. And 44% of those wallets interacted with a gaming smart contract. So it's growing heavily, and even versus July, if you compare kind of end of August versus July, the number increased by 17%. So that's quite a bit of growth. But then you look back a bit more, when you compare to January, it grew by 2,700%. And if you look at year on year, so kind of this day a year ago, the growth is at 4,300%. That is an insane growth. And if we keep going at this pace, that means next year, by August, we could be at 40 to 50 million gamer wallets. That's crazy. And I hope that happens really. So if we look at some chart here, September has not ended yet, but August confirmed the trend. We started observing earlier this year this trend, and it's about DApp usage is beginning to shift heavily towards blockchain games. So it's outperforming DeFi, and whilst NFTs have been generating ever greater sales volumes, it's these blockchain-powered games that are carrying the load in terms of usage. And the rise in gaming popularity is also positively impacted by NFTs. So in blockchain games, game items are represented by NFTs usually. That's representing an important subject in NFT marketplaces across all the blockchains and protocols. And in August alone, the NFT space generated over $5 billion of total sales volume. Almost 20% of that, or 1 billion of these recorded sales, involved gaming NFTs to some extent. And all in all, the gaming footprint is getting bigger by the day. So the play to earn movement is reaching masses. And we can see that those emerging economies, they're adopting it as a way of living, and it has become relevant enough to raise the attention from an entire government. Now, if you look at that, but from DappRadar's traffic perspective, since the play to earn movement and the whole NFT space began to heat up in July, most of the attention has remained on the side of the chain at the expense of DeFi dApps. And in May 2021, 55% of DappRadar's audience interacted with DeFi dApps, and while the other 45% was equally divided into NFTs and games. If we fast forward that to August, the numbers have changed drastically. So DeFi dApps represented only around 19% of traffic, NFTs 36%, whereas games outperformed both with 45%. And considering DappRadar is the go-to platform for all things Dapp related, this signals a pretty significant shift in user interest. Now, talking about specifically in-game NFTs, so what we can see that they're accounting for an increasing percentage of NFTs being traded. So in January, in-game NFTs were responsible for only 2.8% of NFT trading volume, 13% of sales count, and 12% of unique traders. And this has changed significantly in August. We now see 90% of trading volume belonging to in-game NFTs, 34% of sales, and 37% of unique traders. That's quite a jump. So when we're talking about in-game NFTs market share growth, it grew by 580% in trading volume, 160% in individual sales, and 210% in unique traders between January and last month. What I can say, it doesn't seem that it's going to stop anytime soon. Let's wait and see what happens. And going a bit deeper in the whole topic of, it's not just NFTs, but it's also gaming tokens, ERC20s, fungible ones. So the nature of play-to-earn dApps, it relies on an in-game currency. Although the tokenomics, change from one dApp to another, this in-game currency is no different from other cryptocurrencies, technically speaking. And as a result of the play-to-earn revolution, several game-based cryptos are easily outperforming their token peers. Axis, for example, the X Infinity governance token, they showed a strong trend that relates to the game's recent success. And Axis has yielded great results to its token holders. Since the start of June, Axis price has increased an outstanding 1,400% and 70% since last month. On June 1st, it traded at $5, and on August 31st, it was at $73. Quite a bit of a jump. And whilst Axis performance can be expected due to its strong game performance, other game-based tokens are following the same line, particularly GameFi-related tokens like Mobox and Illuvium. So Mobox started June at 77 cents and closed the quarter at $8.79. ILV, the Illuvium token, started June at $63 and closed the quarter at $493, with an all-time high in early September at $639. That's again a tenfold compared to early June prices. It's worth noting, though, that the Illuvium governance token can be staked or locked for a 12-month period, vesting period within the platform, and that's basically adding a strong GameFi layer on the tokenomics design. The game itself attracted more than 7,000 unique wallets in August. That's again a 70% increase month over month. And in transaction volumes, Illuvium achieved 88% increase from July. It was generating more than $75 million in August alone. And the last one of the last points here, Splinterlands. In late July, Splinterlands launched Splinter Shards, or SPS, the governance token, helping the game record its best month ever. And they saw 130,000 unique wallets in 1 month, 400% increase, and the spike in usage resulted in more than 58 million transactions. As per the project itself, the game's market cap, that includes all cards and collectibles, is almost $200 billion. And while the tokens growth doesn't seem quite as impressive compared to others, the results it's helping drive for the game, they are remarkable. And whilst the aforementioned tokens cannot be compared straight away due to the difference in their respective market caps, game-based cryptos underline the strong trend this sector is currently experiencing. Even if it's not by playing, individuals can make most of games, by simply holding their in-game currencies or governance tokens. Some example, Bitcoin versus Axis token. Considering the tumble Bitcoin and other established cryptocurrencies have taken as of late, game tokens are doing very, very well and seem to not be as affected by macro news. Of course, we are comparing apples to oranges to some extent here, considering we are comparing currencies per se with governance tokens, but this is very, very good news if we're shifting towards a community-driven economy. And how about Metaverse? I think talking about blockchain gaming without mentioning Metaverse would be a disaster. So the Metaverse concept itself is a noteworthy part of the industry and a potential game changer. Those virtual worlds, they aim to become the place where individuals from communities, they form communities to create, trade, and socialize. And as projects in the Metaverse move forward in their corresponding developments, their relevance is only trending upwards. For example, virtual lands within important virtual worlds are becoming more expensive. Like in Indonesia, Axis virtual world, some plots, some land that are a significant size, and they're being sold for more than $500,000. And some well-located land plots in the sandbox, now home to Snoop Dogg's virtual self, have surpassed $850,000. And this trend will probably keep the same pace as several gaming devs that involve virtual land features. So the game goes for, say, partnerships that add an extra layer of credibility and luster to metaverses. For instance, Blankos, a high-end metaverse, has partnered with Burberry for exclusive in-game skins. So as those virtual worlds reach their respective development milestones and more partnerships are announced, expect this space to substantially increase in the upcoming months. Essentially, the metaverse is being formed as a virtual environment where anybody can contribute and exchange value. Here's a quick look on the virtual land sales. Despite a slight dip between May and July, which is not an unusual correction after a hyped all-time high, we were back on track with yet a new all-time high in August. So as the dust settles and the concept of metaverses becomes more commonplace, we should expect to see much steadier growth and hopefully less severe ups and downs. So stringing this all together, blockchain games, NFTs, game-based governance tokens, and the emerging concept of the metaverse, we see a clear direction here. We are likely headed towards the creation and adoption of a new virtual layer to reality that's driven and governed by the community, where we'll get to trade, socialize, build, play, and much more. So metaverses seem like a natural habitat for this type of reality and its underlying decentralized economy. And this means that even more use cases for NFTs and blockchain gaming will appear. NFTs will likely be at the core of the metaverse's revenue model, and hence at the core of this new decentralized economy. So gaming and its mechanics, on the other hand, they will be the driver of the social life that underpins and drives this economy. And I said this 3 years ago, I say it now, we are very much headed towards a Ready Player One scenario. Perhaps not in the coming months, and not in exactly the same way how it happens in Ready Player One, but the next few years will certainly propel us into virtual life. And besides some philosophical questions that many of us undoubtedly have, this also raises some important, more practical questions about the kind of short, mid-term development of blockchain gaming. And some of mine are as follows. So, when will traditional gaming embrace play to earn? I think play to earn is disrupting traditional games business models, and I expect traditional gaming companies to build new games with play to earn elements rather than converting existing titles to blockchain games, which could potentially put their existing business at risk if it doesn't work well. So I think we'll have to wait for that. It's going to be new titles rather than converting existing ones. Regulation is another topic that will come sooner or later. When and how? My guess would be actually pretty soon. I think we see that DeFi is under a magnifying glass right now from regulators, and they do a deep dive into it and trying to figure out what's going on, how to regulate it. I think regulation isn't necessarily evil, how everyone kind of trying to make them look, but we all have to fight to get it done right. And the risks of play to earn, so that also has something to do with with regulation. Until now, the absolute majority of games were about having fun. And I believe the fun element will still stay here, but fun has to be one of the core, it has to be one of the core elements of all of this. But if you're fighting another player, and you put some of your assets at risk, which have real money value, you put those assets at risk and you lose a fight and you lose them, that might be a very frustrating and depressing situation. So we need to find ways, we need to find balance between making money and having fun. I think only when we do that, the economy will work and community will be satisfied. And then we have the entry barriers, and what we currently see in X Infinity, for example, that there is a certainly high entry barrier to start playing Axie. It costs quite a bit of money. So talking about free-to-play games that eliminate expensive entry barriers, I think they will come. I think there will be free-to-play games. I mean, there already are some. But the point is, I believe to make money, you will still have to invest to get better items, better gear, to start making some money back. You can look at traditional existing games that have real money economies. For example, Entropia Universe. You can, in theory, play without investment, but that's not going to be very fun. It's going to be a very painful grinding for probably hundreds of hours, at least, until you achieve something. And so to finish this, if you wonder if there is a new Axie brewing, I think what Axie achieved is much more than just building a game. It's a very supportive community that consists of millions of gamers worldwide. So I think building such a game is kind of easy compared to building such a strong community tied to the game itself. But don't get me wrong, I believe Axie will still face some serious competition very soon. So those are some of the questions that I ask myself, and I try to answer those. Now I look forward to hearing yours. Thanks a lot.
Hello, sorry, my camera's doing some weird things there. Thanks for that, Skirmantas. You covered a lot of ground there, not just numbers. Went into philosophy as well.
Yeah, I like that.
I like that too. So we've got some questions sort of popping up. So we'll get round to those. I guess it's sort of one I'd like to sort of ask, I guess because a little bit behind the scenes. Have you been surprised how quick the sort of change has happened? I guess in some sort of context, I was sort of surprised. I guess most of us at DappRadar were surprised last year when we had the sort of DeFi kind of situation where DeFi was sort of this thing that kind of quirky people messed around with, and then suddenly within a space of a month or so, this basically everyone was talking about DeFi, and we seem to have had something similar to that for games, but obviously games are much more accessible than boring finance. So we've seen a much bigger increase. I mean, at the start of the year, were you sort of expecting games to be the big thing that sort of blew up? and how does that sort of make us think about the future? Because it seems to me blockchain sort of either nothing happens or like everything happens. It's literally it's 0 or 1.
Yeah, indeed. If you remember, John, a couple of years ago, a bit less than a couple of years ago in New York, you asked me something similar in a panel, and I didn't give you an answer. So that kind of answers the first bit, that did I expect this to blow up so quickly? Probably not, but something that was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But something that we started working on, last year after DeFi exploded, we started thinking into, okay, so what's next? Blockchain is going in waves. We know that. We saw that during those 3 years. So last year, we actually started preparing for this. We kind of saw NFTs, not necessarily specifically gaming, but kind of NFTs starting to ramp up. And we started preparing for that. So I think we saw NFTs coming up, and we kind of thought that, games should follow after, but we didn't expect it to happen both at once. I think that's the right way to say.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think it's sort of thing where we should always be, we're always sort of expecting this sort of hockey stick growth, but you never can tell exactly when it's gonna turn up. There's always the surprise is the timing, not what's happening. At least I guess for those of us in the space. I mean, you've been around even longer than me. So let's have a look at some of the questions. I mean, you mentioned a bit about regulations. So I've got a question about that, which I guess is about the sort of national governments make certain decisions. We've seen that particularly in China over the last kind of months, and certainly last week. So the question is, I'll pull out here. Will there be an international sort of? Do you think that will be how it moves? Because governments can't really regulate, or it's hard for them to regulate these things nationally. So do you think at some point it becomes a sort of an international, sort of decision-making thing? I suppose particularly at an EU level. I mean, you guys are based in Lithuania,
so. I believe in a borderless economy. I think that's when we think metaverse, when we think blockchain, I don't believe you cannot stop this train, and you can try. China is trying to a certain extent. SEC is also trying. I think at some point it's going to be obvious that you cannot stop this train. I think you could a few years back. That was still possible, but now I think it's just too late. And I'm living in this world where I'm able to travel freely everywhere. And I would just say I cannot have this asset or this asset because it's like on the blockchain, or no, my head is exploding. I don't believe in that.
Good. So let's see what else we've got.
I think there is a good one I want to answer actually. About,
go for it.
So anonymous one is asking about how can you ensure children aren't accessing and using NFT and blockchain games and hopping on and using their parents' card and so on. I think the point about parents' card is valid, but it happens with all the games. So what do you do? Refund? Maybe. I think you can protect your credit cards better in that case. But the thing about children and NFTs and so on, I think it's not about ensuring that they cannot access them. I genuinely think that the blockchain and NFTs, they can help everyone to educate on kind of how economy works, how free market works. I'm coming with this from the example of Steam Marketplace, and when we have those in-game skins like CSGO and other games, a ton of kids are playing there, even if they're not supposed to. But from my past experience, and myself when I was a minor, I was there. So you get to know a lot about how the economy works, how the market works, how to buy and sell, how to speculate, these kind of things. And I think it's not about protecting and ensuring that children don't access that. It's about giving them the right tools, how to understand this market, how does it work? I think it's about that. And your credit card should be always with you. So that's on your own.
No, I think there's an interesting sort of point where, as you say, the sort of the knee-jerk reaction is the wrong thing, but sort of the default option is how can we restrict children's access to these things which may not be helpful for them, which I think is a perfectly rightful way to think about it. I mean, I've got kids, so but actually, as you say, in most cases you can't. There's no ways you can stop kids doing this. Even in China now with their rules, they find companies are setting up, sort of pretend to be an adult sort of services, so children can get around this 3-hour restriction in gaming. So the one thing with blockchain is, because everything is transparent, in some ways it's better for kids, because it opens it up, and there is sort of the idea of, you can have identity, but that shouldn't mean that kids are restricted from it, really. So, because everything, I think I agree with you, everything will have value on, with blockchains, because we now have internet money, everything has value. And that's something you'd be better off, getting your kids kind of into, and allowing them to sort of take the full opportunities of that, rather than sort of hiding it away, because they're going to do it anyway, particularly if there's financial value attached to it. So I guess that's yeah. I mean, a really more personal view, but I think it's correct in the sense that we will see a lot of the legislation will sort of come around that sort of route. That's what we see with games and loot boxes, isn't it? It's often very much, how can we protect children from that? So I think that's sort of how we'll see governments approaching a lot of the blockchain stuff.
I think something, just to continue a bit on that, if we, in the ideal world, I think one thing that can happen is that we'll move to a place where kind of, let's say, where you discover those dApps, where you discover NFTs and so on, that place is kind of moderated properly and in a, decentralized way. This basically means that, what your kids can access and cannot access can be also moderated by somebody else who has kids, and kind of, so we can make it happen in this world that the gatekeepers, that community is a gatekeeper, and they decide, we all decide what to show, what not to show, what can be accessed, what cannot be accessed. So I believe in that. John, I think you're muted.
Hello, yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to get our next speaker in as well. So I'm doing two things at once. Alexander is here. We're trying to we've got him. That's fine. So let's take some more questions while we're looking at that. So here's an interesting one. Do you see a dominant player emerging for NFT integration at an API level? And I guess that's, as you sort of pointed out earlier on, the interesting thing for Axie was sort of when it created its own blockchain and sort of took more control of its sort of infrastructure. That was when, the big growth happened. And so that sort of goes towards people rolling their own technology, but clearly not all games companies, and most games companies, are not going to be able to sort of roll their own blockchain or scaling solution in the way that Axie did. How do you see that playing off? It's, I guess, in the short term.
That's a good one. I think might not be exactly what the question is about, really, but something that's related to NFTs and metadata is a kind of a problem. And talking about that, it's like a lot of the metadata is centralized, and that can be a big problem if servers go down and the blockchain is still there, but those assets are pretty much, they're not useless. They still say you own it, but you don't know what you own because you cannot see it. So that might be a problem. And I think when we talk about the emerging players, to a certain extent, we have a problem with OpenSea, because they're the biggest marketplace, and they're collecting all those orders, and they also provided some sort of a standard for how the metadata should be done. I'm not blaming OpenSea here by no means. It's like just that their order book is kind of centralized, and then it's getting hard to play around with those NFTs, accessing the order book, integrating more, so that more projects can integrate that and so on. I think we have to move towards leaving it all open. And when we say API, I think that should be pretty much a non-existent thing as a centralized API. It has to be either just call a smart contract and get the data, either use the graph, use some other data provider that's actually decentralized. Otherwise, we'll end up in a situation where we have still single point of failure. And we saw this in the blockchain. It sometimes happens, even if the graph was down, I think last year, and you couldn't just access Balancer, you couldn't access some websites. That was really harsh, and you see the power. So I think we have to move there. We have to try to avoid that there is a single power of kind of single point of failure.
Yeah, no, I think it is one of these sort of eternal debates about sort of this. I think everyone wants decentralization, but how do you sort of get there? without the whole thing sort of falling apart. And so, as you say, there's a surprising amount of blockchain infrastructure, even on Ethereum, which are central points of failure, and occasionally they fall over and everything. Everyone pulls their hair up, but I guess it's to a degree, as long, I guess most people have the sort of vision that they want to be more decentralized over time, but we won't go too far down that route. So I think we are setting up for Alexander next from Axie. So I will leave the question. I don't really know what it means, Alex. Do you think Axie will have the same result as CryptoKitties? We'll leave that. Maybe leave that one to next time. I assume you're suggesting that that CryptoKitties had a big sort of bubble at the start and then sort of went away a little bit. Although CryptoKitties is coming back, so don't write off CryptoKitties yet. So anyway, I think at that point we'll say thank you very much, Skirmantas. I think you're going to be around for the panel later on as well, aren't you? Is that right? Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Good.
Thank you, John.
So if you have any more questions specifically for Skirmantas, we will be dealing with them in about an hour or so at the sort of ending panel for this particular section. Thanks very much.